Hello, welcome to the breathing space. Oh, so excited to be here again for our weekly show. My name is Kim Standyvin. This is the lovely Morna Haste. We are the co-founders of the Life Design Lab and your hosts, for our breathing space show. Oh, so much happening in terms of processing last week when we were at Women Deliver. If you haven't caught our live show from last week, please be sure to check it out. There'll be a link below. But we came live to you from the Women Deliver Conference 2019, which is the biggest women's conference in the world. World leaders from all over the place. Magical women. I mean, I can't even put words to it. So we're going to set up.
Wasn't it nuts? One thing that really stood out for me was there were so many world leaders at this conference, and they were everywhere because there were so many concurrent sessions that, you know, at one point we're sitting 2 feet away from the ex-Prime Minister of Australia while she gives just a 10-minute talk. It was crazy.
Yeah,
okay, back to you.
Crazy. No, it was, and I think that's it, is that there's no real words. Our language just doesn't have the words to share with you the power and energy of 8,000 women and men. There were men there, I will say. Women and men in the same building. We were at Canada Place in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the ocean. Like, it was just, like I said, I have no words. But what we want to do before we get into the conversation is take a moment and have some breathing space. And today, just want you to notice right now how you're breathing, what your body's doing, what position you're in. So just take that second, check in.
Wow.
And take a moment just to reposition. Take a deep breath. Because we don't do that. I know I need that today. Whew. Yeah, so today we want to spend this 20 minutes just sharing with you our experience and giving you some tools and tips on how to integrate some of these big experiences that we have in our life. So Morna, I'll just start with you, or first, before I want to do is to sit with the question, because I think this question really was heightened for me at the conference, and that is, what time is it in your world? And I don't mean by the actual time, like it's 2:33. I mean that what time is it for you right now in the world? So have you sit with that question as Morna talks about, you know, what came up for you since attending the conference?
Well, actually, I want to reflect on that question for a moment, and I want to say hi to the folks who are watching us live. If you're watching us live, let us know that you're here. We've turned off Facebook as well because we're having a little bit of a challenge with the software that we use for this broadcast. It's going a little fuzzy, so we don't have Facebook open as well. So if you're here, then give us a shout out, say hi, let us know you're here. I want to start by reflecting on the question you just asked, Kim, what time is it in your world? Because for me, that was the overarching question of this experience. What time is it in our world as a collective? You know, there were women and men from I think 150 countries attending Women Deliver. So we were hearing diverse perspectives from all over the planet, you know, around what's happening, what time is it in different places in the world. And then, you know, that question really started landing on me. What time is it for me? What time is it for you? You know, what time is it for us as female leaders, as women who are out to create impact, create change in the world? What time is it? And what is the work that we need to do now? And it was super interesting to be at this conference with our friend Janet, who is a little older than us. I'm not entirely sure how much older she is. Hey, Janet, if you're watching. It was really interesting to be in this experience with Janet, who is a little older and, you know, was involved in the women's movement long before us. And, you know, to hear her saying a couple of times, I can't believe we're still talking about some of this stuff. You know, so I've been really reflecting on that absolutely we've made progress in many places, but it was highlighted several times at this conference that, yes, we've made progress, but for many women in many regions of the world, there has been no progress. They still have no access to education. They still don't have basic rights. They still don't have control over their own bodies, their own reproductive rights, their own health care. And that's a massive problem, not obviously just for those women, but it was super interesting. Again, I've been looking into more around the climate crisis that we're facing. And there's a book called Drawdown, which I haven't read yet, but I'm going to read it. And it gives 100 things that we can practically do. And one of those things is educate women and girls. And what happens when we educate women and girls? We transform families, we transform communities, we transform countries. And then the other thing I want to say before I kind of hand the ball back is, and this was said several times in the conference, that women's rights are under attack in many places in the world. So yes, there's been progress, but there's also now significant backlash in many areas. And in fact, we see this in the West. We can see it in parts of America, not so much in Canada, but in sort of some of the more fundamentalist governments that are springing up around the world. So we can't take anything for granted as women, and there's still a long way to go.
Well, I'm going to actually going to toss the ball back to you, because I think just as you're speaking, it ties into your message about warriorship, and just like you to speak a little bit about what you mean by that. Yeah,
thanks, Kim. I think I talk a lot about warriorship and the work around Revolutionary Woman and leadership training for women. And firstly, we were in a room full of warriors, of female warriors. But I do want to talk about this word a little bit and what I mean by it, because it can be a little confusing. I'm not talking about war, although I do feel for many of us, we are in a battle. We are in an actual, we are in a war. I'm not talking about aggression. And I actually looked up a definition to help with the understanding of this word warriorship. So, and I want to read that out. Warriorship does not refer to bringing war to others. Aggression and violence are one of the sources of our problems, not the solution. The word warrior is taken from the Tibetan people and literally means one who was brave. One who was brave. Warriorship in this context is the tradition of human bravery, a tradition of fearlessness with helping others, a tradition of fearlessness with helping others. And man, did we see this everywhere,
everywhere
at the conference, this tradition of bravery and of stepping up to be brave over and over and over again. And I think that was one of the big things that came up, and we talked about a little bit about this last week. There was one of the plenaries that we went to was, I think 8, 9 or 10 women who have led and are leading some of the major women's movements on the planet. And several of them said that, okay, this, our work has come to light now, but we've been working on this our whole lives. We've been working towards this in various forms. We've dedicated our lives to it. And that's what I mean by warriorship. It's not a one-time deal. And it also takes training. It takes daily training. It takes time to be able to stand powerfully and create change without creating harm, without harming ourselves, without harming others. Warriorship to me is about taking a stand, being the kind of leader that we need to create the future. We need to be the future we want to create now. I don't believe we can create the kind of future we want from a place of fear, from a place of depletion, from a place of exhaustion. And that's not to say we're not going to feel fear and depletion and exhaustion, but we need to know how to work with that skillfully. And really that's one of the reasons why we have a lab for women.
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to toss the ball back.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a perfect example, Morna, of why I'm like glued to you, is because you are so talented in articulating yourself and these ideas and these big concepts. Because I just got a deeper knowing about what warriorship is, and why taking a stand and standing even is my last name, why that's so important. And I think, what I want to talk about my experience of the conference is I'm a very sensitive person. I'm emotional. I would label myself as an empath. I take it in and it has a physical impact on me. So when I returned home, I kind of went down into this crash of energy hangover, people hangover, and feeling it physically in my body and emotionally in my body. And I think one of the takeaways from that is creating and allowing ourselves space to recover, to integrate the learning, to allow ourselves time to figure stuff out and get some clarity around what is it that I just experienced, because it was so intense. And we were in the room with such amazing women and tragic stories. I mean, some of the stories that I heard, hit me to my core and hurt me to actually think that this is happening in the world. And so I want to speak to, I think when you said, as warriors, we need to have that energy to take a stand, but we also need to give ourselves compassion that we're human and that we're going to deplete and that we're going to need time to recover and rejuvenate, and so that we can get back in the game again. So I'm curious about, I know you have a really cool model that you'd like to share with the listeners. It's called the GROAN Zone. Would you mind just taking a few minutes?
Sure, I'm going to talk about it a little bit, and I know I talked about it in the ad for this, yeah.
For the promotional content. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about this thing called the GROAN Zone, and it's a model or a concept that I first learned about through my years of doing large scale facilitation work. So holding space for many diverse people to come together and do something together. And I noticed this phenomenon that would happen. You start off on something and then lots of information comes in, lots of different opinions, lots of different experiences, and there's this kind of universal thing that happens. And this happens to us, and I'm going to show the diagram in a minute, but this doesn't just happen to us in situations where we're trying to make complicated decisions with other people or trying to move through some kind of transformation, but it happens at events like this as well, where there's just so much information, stimulus, incredible people. We could have literally been in 20 different places at once at this event. There was just an incredible buffet of options, and it can pretty quickly start to feel overwhelming. And that's okay, actually, if we can sit with it. And what happens in this space, if we can learn to skillfully sit with this place of overwhelm, and actually there are two different kinds of overwhelm, and I think I want to talk about that next week so that we can have some discernment around it, because often we're told that overwhelm is something we want to run away from. We don't want to experience it. We want to minimize it. And actually, I'll just mention this now. So there's kind of the to-do list overwhelm. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that kind of fuzzy feeling we get inside when we can't quite figure something out and we're grasping for it. Yeah, so it's called the GROAN Zone. So I'll show you my little picture. I'll peek over the top. I peek around the side at it. So, you start off, where are we starting over here? And then we start to diverge and go out. And we enter into this kind of place in the middle called the GROAN Zone. And it can feel really uncomfortable, especially if you're experiencing it with a whole group of people. Say you're in a large scale conversation. And sometimes the temptation is to just stop feeling like that. I can't feel like this anymore. And then we might end up making a quick decision, or a decision that doesn't stick, or a decision that doesn't end up feeling good because we just don't want to feel this way. It's a really underdeveloped human skill. And I would say it's one of the core 21st century leadership skills that we must develop as leaders if we're really going to tackle the scale of the issues and problems that we face as a species. We've got to get skillful at hanging out in this, looking at my finger.
Yeah.
We've got to get skillful at finding it. That's so funny. And hanging out in this space. And when we do, magic happens.
Oh, and I can say that, yeah, and that's what's happening, I think, for me right now, is that I'm allowing myself the space to be comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Allowing myself in that groan zone and just letting things kind of bounce around rather than, deciding what I think or deciding, that I got to move forward on something. It's like, no, I'm going to stop in this groan zone and I'm going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to be hard. And I love that diagram because I think we've been trained or socialized to quickly move out of it and make things all rosy again. And it's like, no, I think that's what this conference really taught me, is because it was so intense for 4 days. Like, this was a 4-day, like 7 a.m. we were up. We didn't get home till 8 or 10 to 8, 10 o'clock at night. And allowing ourselves to just digest everything and really figure it out, right? Yeah.
And that is a really beautiful analogy. Hey, Leah, it's good to see you. That is a really beautiful analogy. And, it's interesting. Once you start to become aware of this groan zone process, this diagram, you can see it all over the place. And you can see it in, often I see this in governmental systems where we get presented with the quick fix or the magic bullet, or this politician saying, okay, if we do this, we're going to get that. And it's very tempting. We seem to fall for it. We fall for it. We fall for it. Well, if we just do this, we'll get that. If we just build a wall, we'll fix that pesky immigration problem. No, it's so much more.
Or even, it's complex. And I think, just because we only have a few minutes here, just want to offer the viewers some tips. How do you sit in the groan zone? What are some ways that we can allow it to happen rather than resist it?
Okay.
What do you do, Morna?
Okay, so a couple of things. There's actually, I won't give any numbers on how many things I want to say here, but I think there's 3 minutes. So there's a few things I want to say. One is, you're not alone. And so I didn't hear any woman stand up at this conference and speak and say, I did it all. It takes a posse, it takes a village of support. And the thing about warriorship, especially if you're doing it in a collective, if you're doing it with other people, is everyone can take their stand, can take their turn, can take a place, to give you some rest. So that's the number one thing I want to say. You need to be with other people in the work you're doing. Number two, just recognize that this groan zone exists. And I think that's one of the awareness is key. If you understand that this is a natural part of any big thing you're doing, then okay, maybe you can sit with it more comfortably, or sit in the discomfort because it's not a comfortable place. And then the third thing is, and this may sound kind of weird and cheesy, tidy up something. Tidy something up. Yeah. So you can either declutter something. It could be something as simple as a drawer in your kitchen. Clean up your desk. Go and take some weeds out of the garden. Go for a walk. But that act of cleaning something up actually does something in your brain, and it helps your brain start to make sense of what you've experienced.
Yes,
and you can even do this in a large group of people that you're working with. Say you've gotten all your ideas out and everything's kind of a little bit messy. Collectively tidy up can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Morna. I just had to
sleep.
Go ahead.
Sleep.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay,
I
great.
think I've slept more in the last 3 days than I have, usually. Like, I'm talking 12 hours. But because biologically, that's when our body and the unconscious does its work. In sleep, the unconscious does its work is solving problems for you, is figuring out where things fit when you're doing something else. Sleep is number one for me. Number two is gardening, going outside, pulling weeds, cutting grass, you know, I remember a really quick example. I was making spaghetti one day and I had the most incredible insight because I was doing something else and it just popped in. So it allows you that space for pop-in insight. So we are out of time. So what's the last message that you want to share, Morna, before we wrap up here?
It's so funny that you asked me that when I need more glass of water.
Now that she needs some water.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to say, and again, we need a whole other show on this.
Yes.
Is what's your stand? You know, this question that we asked at the beginning, what time is it in your world? What's your stand? And it doesn't have to be a grand stand. It can be a little stand or a big stand, and it has to reflect the time that you're in your life. What can you do, and what can you do with sanity? And I use that word really intentionally because the last thing we need to be doing is putting more crazy into the world. We've got enough of it. So, you know, what small thing can you do to bring some more peace, some more internal peace for yourself, some more peace into your family? What's the small thing that you can do to create more of the future that you want to live into now? So that was probably 6 things. Back to you, Kim.
Wow, I'm gonna have to go back to the transcript and write that out for myself too. I think for me, you know, the GROAN Zone can be challenging, and I think it's the space, like you said, for magic, and taking a stand for what you need and what you believe in can mean that you disappoint others, and it can mean that you disappoint the most important people in your life, and that's okay. I just want to say that because in order for us to step up to who we are, what matters to us, sometimes we have to risk rocking the boat a little bit. And I just want to say it's okay to disappoint others, to be true to yourself. And that's, I think, why people want to get out of the GROAN Zone really quickly, because that's the realization. It's like, ooh, this isn't going to go over very well. I got to move out of here. Right. Oh, and I just wanted to show off my, both Morna and I got these necklaces at the conference, the feminist necklace, and I'm wearing it proudly because not only am I wearing it for me, because I do consider myself a feminist, but I'm wearing it for all of those beautiful women who stood up and spoke their minds, had their voice heard. Amazing. So, all right, we're over time. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, this is Morna and Kim, the co-founders of the Life Design Lab. If you want to check out what we're doing in the lab, which is really this work, building women up with their leadership skills, with their sense of community, so that they have the strength and the power to take a stand in the world that, you know, what matters to them. There'll be links below. Share the show if you think there's someone in the world that you think would benefit from it. We're so grateful for all of you who tune in. This is such a blessing that we have the technology and the ability to put this on. So, wow. All right. Take a breath. Bye. Have a great day.
See you next week. Bye, ladies.